I love it. I'll tell you what, when we started talking to Howard Schultz and Starbucks, we talked about all the places where special things were happening, whether it was in Harlem, in New York, or whether it was in New Orleans, Louisiana, whether it was in Florida. But Howard always kept coming back to the work that you and this community's been doing at Crenshaw, talking about how this could be the model for where we need to go in the future. Well, tell us about that.
Let me just say, first of all, thank you to this great audience for getting up tonight and coming out at Crenshaw in celebration. You know, you're seeing the spirit of this school. You're seeing the spirit of this community right here, which is all about trying to do what's best for our children.
But it's about creating a community where people can learn.
A sense of community. It's about making sure that the community's involved and that people are excited about the future for our kids. And I have to tell you, our friends at Starbucks have just been phenomenal. Part of the way that we end up solving these problems is to bring corporations like Starbucks back into an integral involvement with urban communities. And if you look out in the audience tonight, we've got our team from Starbucks out here as well in the audience.
Claire, let's cut to the heart of the problem, though, because the question is how. How do you create that community? Clearly, look, let's be blunt. This is a tough neighborhood. How do you create a situation in which you can have this spirit, excellence, and the ability for young people to actually thrive and learn?
Well, I think there's a couple of stages to that, and I'm not here to say we have all the answers. We have one model that I think is doing some wonderful things in this community, and what we've done with a model called Neighborhoods at Work is to look at the problem holistically. So to not just say the problem is a school or the issue is something else in a community, is to look at 4 or 5 different disciplines at the same time. So we look at the safety around a school, making sure the kids are getting to the school safely, getting home safely. Look at the health of students, make sure that they're getting mental health services and physical health services. Look at the economics, make sure that the parents of children are employed. Look at the housing scenario for kids, so that make sure that the families aren't losing their homes as a result of the housing crisis. And so we have a wraparound model that surrounds this school called Neighborhoods at Work. The Crenshaw piece is an enormous piece of it, because what the model we've embraced says ultimately is that the school is the heart of a community. And if that school isn't functioning, the neighborhood isn't functioning.
Which actually turns things on its head. We saw this in Waiting for Superman, John Ridley, where there was the belief, and the film talked about how there had always been the belief that schools fail because of the neighborhoods around it. And of course, now people like Blair are looking at it differently, saying, wait a second, we're not just going to fix that school. You've got to wrap your arms around an entire neighborhood and have more of a holistic approach. That's pretty revolutionary.
Well, I think there's something interesting about the idea of continuing education. That education is all part of the day. That it starts, and I know this may sound trite, but it starts with a good breakfast, getting a good meal at the beginning of the day.
Absolutely. Getting
in school early and either communing with your friends, doing something, but getting there in time so you don't have to rush to learn. When you're at school, being in an environment where the teachers can teach because they want to teach, but also, and we were talking about this, not just teaching to the test. Teaching in ways that kids learn, but also learn beyond, 2 + 2 is 4. How does that work in your environment? How does it work with word problems and things like that? And then after school programs, and then when you get back home again, being in an environment where the parents are checking up. Right. What did you learn today? How did that test go? Do you need some help? So when you talk about that community and you talk about the school being the center of it, I get that, because when everything is focused on the kids, everything else tends to rise up a level. The difficulty is getting all those things around it, all those things around education to rise at that same level.
And it starts, Blair, and you've talked about this before, doing what you can to make sure the kids get to school safe.
That's right.
And make sure that they can go to and from.
Basics like security.
Yeah,
that's right.
With security. So what do you do there?
It is absolutely imperative that our young people get to and from the school safely. And in certain instances in parts of this town and even in this neighborhood, we had massive numbers of our children who were being accosted on their way to school, pocket checked on their way to school. And with our friends at LAPD, with the Sheriff's Department, with the security teams that you see around here, and quite frankly, with the involvement of the community. You know, you can get folks to come out and do things outside their house when kids are walking to and from school that will help kids get to school safely. And with the involvement of the community, we've been able to significantly curtail that problem. And it's not fair. It's not fair to think that a young person who walks through a crime-infested neighborhood and has to sit in a classroom and learn after being accosted, they're not on an equal ground with somebody who doesn't have to do that. I mean,
exactly. Coach?
Well, you know, it's been interesting when you start what we used to call community policing, getting neighborhood watch groups with the police out of their squad cars, doing bicycle patrols, foot patrols, to keep the bad element out as well as away from. Because in a lot of cities, as you well know, if you weren't gang affiliated and you didn't have a sign, you couldn't walk street to street. But you made a decision to take the Urban League and say enough is enough. When did you arrive at this decision? Because I know this whole area, and Crenshaw has had its ups and downs. Why did you take it, and when did you take this decision? We're going to step in and make this thing work.
You know, one of the things I need to say clearly is that the model that we're pursuing right now, Neighborhoods at Work, involves 150 different partners. It's not just the Urban League.
Yep.
It's a whole conglomeration of private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector, educational sector. This school is changing, not so much because of the Urban League. It's changing because the door has swung open for the students and the teachers and the administrators and all of the parents and the folks who care about these young people to finally get their chance to get involved and make the school work. We've gotten the school empowered down at the local level where decisions are being made where they need to be made in the school. And so, to answer your question directly, Digger, to me, we've sat back long enough. We've analyzed the problem long enough. We are now in a mode where we need to put forth solutions. We need to think about innovations. When was the last time in this country we can really think about the times when we were social sector innovators or educational innovators? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have to go pretty far back. And my argument is it's time for us to really think about building 21st century models. Give you one example. This school is part of what we call the Greater Crenshaw Educational Partnership. It involves the University of Southern California, on the ground here at Crenshaw, as part of that partnership, the Urban League and another group called the Tom and Ethel Bradley Foundation, working together with the school, with parents and teachers, to make the school better. Now, if we could get major universities from all across America to engage with schools, imagine the changes that we could have, the resources that they could bring.
Yeah.
Mike Barnacle.
You know, we live in a country where there's 9% unemployment right now, chronic unemployment, joblessness. I'm going to assume that unemployment in this community is much higher than 9% and has been for quite some time. What kind of a hurdle is joblessness in this community to your goals? Enormous
problem. The unemployment rate for African American males in this community is north of 30%.
Yeah.
Oh. It's almost 10 percentage points higher than the Great Depression, just to put it in perspective. So it's an enormous issue. The integral connection between education and employment cannot be lost, right? So first of all, we believe that in the long term, if we continue to focus on education, we will help solve some of those chronic unemployment issues. The other piece is we have fully engaged around trying to get people trained for new jobs of the 21st century in this neighborhood, trying to make sure that young people have jobs. We provide almost 300 jobs for young people over the summer to keep them off the streets in the summer, which is a really important piece of this.
What about the logistics of the jobs? I mean, jobs here as opposed to jobs, you know, out in the valley, and you can't get there because there's no public transportation. What about that issue?
It's a big issue, and in fact, we are now a part of this whole Crenshaw rail line, which is coming through by 2014. That's the biggest single economic development ever in the history of the Crenshaw district. It's going to be a $1.7 billion initiative that's going to provide, I think it's up to 8,000 jobs now is what they're quoting with respect to this project. And so that's some long-term and some short-term jobs. And so we believe that now there's a movement afoot to bring this corridor back to life, and I think the rail line will be a big part of that.
That's nearly as many jobs as were created in Afghanistan for the
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk, though, about the circumstances by which you do this.
Yeah.
California, as well as the United States, but California more than the United States, facing one of the great budget crises of all time. California is in worse financial shape than ever before. And so I guess the question is, with government resources drying up, how do you create partnerships, whether it's with Starbucks or other people in the private sector, to make sure that Crenshaw continues growing and going in the direction that it needs to go? How do you create these partnerships to drive unemployment from 30% in this community? Because, again, you're looking at a holistic approach.
Right.
How do you get it from 30 to 20 to 10 to the national average? How do you do that?
So again, you're hitting on a point. This, as I said to you during the break, this is one of the first times in my almost 25 years out here in California that I've actually been really worried about our state. I mean, we've been in crises before, right? But we've always thought, oh, we'll get out of it, we'll grow out of it. This is a crisis that's happening in Sacramento, that's happening in Los Angeles, in terms of the fiscal crisis that's happening in our school district. So you see it on multiple levels. And there really isn't a revenue solution that's going to be coming forth anytime soon. So how do we get out of it? I think we get out of it two ways. One, by thoughtfully engaging the corporate sector and the philanthropic sector. The philanthropic sector is actually doing reasonably well, and the corporate sector, as you know, is doing very well, right? So there's an opportunity to begin to engage them in very creative ways to solve problems. Give you an example. The folks from Starbucks didn't just contribute monetarily to Crenshaw High School. A couple of weeks ago, 300 baristas from Starbucks swarmed the campus of Crenshaw, painting, cleaning, planting, doing all the things that help beautify this campus for young people. That's one of the things that corporate America can do. Embrace a school. If you're a business leader, go back in and figure out a school that's failing. If you're a Fortune 1000 company, say, we're going to take that one school and make sure that school doesn't fail. And if every corporation did that, we wouldn't have this problem.
What a huge difference.
And Joe, the secret to that is what corporate America has got to invest in. When you invest in these local schools, this is your future employees and future employers based on what they're going to do to go on to higher education. But the other fact is this is a tax write-off. You know where your dollars are going directly to Crenshaw. So when you can bring in the assets in this community, and I'm talking about Hollywood, I'm talking about television, I'm talking about filmmakers, and say, you know what? There is a life. You see these kids out here right now, that fire academy, that's an asset in this community. We need to step out and everywhere we want to go and bring these assets in so that all of a sudden you say, MGM playing the game. And that's what's got to get done because it's a write-off for them, Joe. And that's how the $2 billion we're wasting a week in Afghanistan, that $2 billion comes back to the United States for communities like this that can make a difference.
Well,
it's an investment and it pays you back.
It absolutely does. The question is how to make that transfer, though, because we're making a lot of blanket statements about Afghanistan, but how to actually do that and make the transfer to pull back and invest.
The power of the people.
We got to start talking about it. Coming up, we still have a big show ahead, and we are. We're going to talk about this with Education Secretary Arne Duncan. He'll join us. Also, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten, Senator Tom Harkin, and the Washington Post's Eugene Robinson. Plus a preview of the weekend's top political stories with the moderator of Meet the Press, David Gregory. But first, we're going to take a look at another of Crenshaw's innovative student programs. Here's a taste of their Business and Entrepreneur Academy.
The first day was, for lack of a better term, magical for me.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Aries Management. Fast Track is a program that is sponsored by the National Association of Securities Professionals. We partner with Crenshaw High School and serve as mentors for 9 students.
Everything is right here.
Exposing them to the financial services industry, public speaking skills, presentation skills, and exposure to senior industry executives.
Our mentors, they've been like big brothers and sisters to us.
Giving them the opportunity to see a world that they've only heard about.
I really feel that I could be here. Like, it's not a dream anymore, it's a reality. And everything is out there. It's just up to me to go out and get it.